Let me start by saying two things. We absolutely know that what we're asking for requires exceptions.
We're not working.
Is there something we can do that Holly can't hold that mic for 20
No,
minutes?
you can't do that. All right, let's ask for a technician to come in. You know, everybody else is okay.
Just stand close to the microphone.
How about now?
That did it. Yay. All right.
It takes a village or something like that.
This is a test. Okay, reset 20 minutes. This is a test. Are everybody ready?
All right.
All right, go.
So, I'm here to present the alternative. We know that this will require exceptions. We're not going to hide from that. We're fully prepared to discuss it. Beyond that, I would point out that the presentation you heard from Mr. Hart and from CalTrans about the outreach to the community was all true. The thing that they didn't say and that didn't happen is there was no controversy. This went through the community, an extended community, and drew very little attention. When you talk about a population well in excess of 100,000 and you get, what, 144 people who responded, that's not a huge response. So tuck that away. I would say what today is about at one fundamental level is whether or not a local community that is directly impacted by this project, whether the people in that community and whether the businesses in the broader regional community are going to get heard, or whether in the end a director in Sacramento who professes familiarity with the region because he drove through it once, or engineers in Sacramento are going to have the final word. And we think we can give you really good reasons why you should take an action to ask for a lot more information than you've received before, and the community should be better informed. So I would start with just indicating how we came to be at this point. Back in June, Director Falsetti, Interim Director Rachel Falsetti, and then Assistant Director Gubbins came down to Montecito at our invitation. We drove them through the highway system. We drove them through the adjoining neighborhoods. And at the end of that meeting, Ms. Falsetti invited us not only to submit comments, as we would on the DEIR, but also to supply some alternative suggestions on how we would approach it. It was in response to that invitation that we went out and we hired consultants to help advise us not only in critiquing what CalTrans had proposed, but helping refine our proposal. It was on our own dime. We didn't go just hire engineers. We went and we hired people who have vast experience, not just designing these things, but actually building them. The people that we consulted with are contractors who've built hundreds and hundreds of freeways, just like the one we're talking about. You will see in the back of your deck a list of the people that were consulted and the people who are on the committee. And also, I think you have a report that the consultants generated. We won't do that in this 20 minutes. Victoria, you want to go to the first slide? You heard a background on the project that I need not repeat. I would say the most complex part of the project are the two interchanges at either end of Montecito. There's the Cabrillo Hot Springs interchange on the west, and there's the Sheffield interchange on the east. What you have on the board, a quick orientation. The two pictures on the left-hand side are of the CalTrans proposal. The two on the right are the community alternative. The top part of the picture is headed toward Santa Barbara. The bottom picture, part of the picture is headed toward Carpinteria. What you see in the two left-hand illustrations, the CalTrans Cabrillo Hot Springs and the Sheffield, everything that you see in red in those pictures has to first be demolished, then it has to be realigned, and then it has to be totally reconstructed. By contrast, on the right hand in the community proposal, everything that you see in red on that has to be constructed only. Now, you don't have to know any of the details of this project to know that there's a substantial difference between those two. So what I'd like to do is go into some of the details. I know we're short on time, but I want to give you some of the details so you better understand what's at stake and how we came to the determination that we did in some of our summary. So if we can go to the next slide, please. Our first effort, the effort of this presentation is to compare the alternatives from CalTrans and the community. We've broken it into 2 time periods, the construction phase and the what does it look like when we've completed it. Next one, please. And our objectives were very simple. We wanted to minimize the length of time it takes to construct it. We wanted to minimize the amount of disruption experienced by the local community and by the region. We wanted to spend the money wisely, and we wanted to solve the problems. The next one. If you look at the slide on the right, the first thing to register, and Ron, if you can show them on the missing from this picture is that it exists currently is a northbound left-hand off-ramp at Cabrillo Hot Springs. In our alternative, that gets removed. It doesn't get removed at the outset, but it does get removed when it's built. Our project involves adding a 3rd lane northbound, and then right there. And then on the right-hand side, we bring a similar to modified F, but with a notable exception. We bring an off-ramp into a revised roundabout. That roundabout currently is already problematic. In the DEIR that CalTrans produced, they indicate that in just over a decade it becomes level of service F. We increase its capacity. We bring the off-ramp into the roundabout without a stop signal. The signal is an important note. And then on the southbound side, where we were just talking about the Los Patos area, the CalTrans proposal studied making Los Patos an off-ramp and an on-ramp. In our discussions with them when they were preparing the DEIR, we said, please don't do that. The off-ramp needs to go away, but we don't have a southbound on-ramp, and you can use that area to make an on-ramp, which they offered in one of their proposals. Yes, the bridge is low, but the city of Santa Barbara has studies that indicate you can reduce the roadbed enough to make a normally licensed truck available and fit under that existing bridge. So we would add a southbound on-ramp there. We keep the left-hand off-ramp and the just completed in the Milpas operations southbound 3-lane bridge and the whole 3-lane section, some 3,000 linear feet of 3-lane freeway that was just completed. By contrast, going to the CalTrans proposal on the left, the very first thing that has to happen in the and you have to forgive me, this is a little tedious, but I think it's important that you understand the complexity because it relates to how long it's going to take to construct this. The very first thing that has to happen in order to construct the CalTrans alternative is you have to close both the northbound left-hand off-ramp and the southbound left-hand on-ramp, off-ramp. So the off-ramps that are used by people locally every single day are going to be closed for virtually the duration of the construction period. That means that all the traffic that normally would get off there is going to be dumped off on Hermosillo on the northbound side, and on the southbound side, all the traffic that normally would get off now has to get off at Los Patos. So that's the first step. Then the next step that happens is CalTrans has to build the new northbound 3-lane section and bridge in the middle. Once that section is completed, then CalTrans has to go through a very difficult traffic control process. And where they cut over the lanes to the south, where they cut over the lanes to the north, none of this is disclosed in the documents, the DER documents. But they have to convert the southbound traffic over and put it headed south on the new northbound bridge. Once that conversion is done, the next thing that happens is they have to tear out the 3,000 feet of roadway and the bridge that they just built, that we just completed 6 months ago. And then they can begin, on the southbound side, they can begin to construct the off-ramp and on-ramp southbound and a new southbound bridge. Once those are completed, then they can do another traffic control maneuver and take the southbound traffic that is currently on the new northbound section of highway. They can move it over to the new southbound section of the highway. At that point, they can take the northbound traffic, which is on the old section of the northbound part of the freeway, move it to the new section of the northbound side, and then they can start the demolition of the old bridge and rebuilding the off-ramp that goes into the roundabout. So at the end of 2.5 to 3 years, that traffic that has been forced onto Hermosillo can now use a new off-ramp on the right-hand side. There's a problem with this we'll come back to in a minute. The off-ramp on the northbound side near the roundabout has a stop signal. I don't know that it's an oxymoron, but to have a stop signal in close proximity to a roundabout seems to me to defeat the very purpose of having a roundabout. In the community alternative, we've avoided that in its entirety. Next slide, please. I'll cover these real quickly. Left-hand side is CalTrans' approach to Sheffield. There is no detail on how they will build it, how they'll route the traffic. They give assurances that they'll make it work, but I will tell you between Cabrillo Hot Springs and Sheffield, there's some 30,000 truckloads of material that have to be brought in for fill or taken out and moved somewhere else. The northbound side of the freeway, the right-hand side, our version, we add a third lane northbound, we add a third lane southbound, and we keep the left-hand off-ramp. Let's go to the next one, please. If we look at the construction phase, what are the impacts we've got? The analysis that our consultants came up with is that it will take, to construct the CalTrans version, it will take 51 months, slightly over 4 years. It will take 19 months to construct the community alternative. The disruption in the traffic, I just covered it, on the off-ramps are closed for virtually the entire duration of the construction at Cabrillo Hot Springs. In the case of the community alternative, all that work is done off the freeway. The ramps are kept open. The CalTrans cost for the Cabrillo Hot Springs, which is the only one they clearly break out, is $50 million. The cost of doing the community alternative is $15 million. And for the this section of the entire project, it's estimated that the CalTrans portion would cost $185 million. Ours would cost $135 million, representing a 37% savings. There's one issue that is not touched on at all in the draft environmental document. And I will tell you, in the outreach that we've done over the last 2 months, it is an area of considerable concern. And that has to do with the economic impacts of this much closure and this much disruption. If you talk to the agricultural business in North County, the largest single economic sector in the county, they're very concerned. What is this going to do? They're already under pressure from labor, related to labor availability. What's this going to do to them when they have difficulty getting their product to market? In the South County, we're dominated by the tourist business. As one hotel operator put it to me, Santa Barbara is a brand. People don't have to come here. They have a choice. And how much disruption, how long does it have to last for that brand to get tarnished so that we then have to end up spending millions and millions of dollars to reestablish it? The central part of the county, not to ignore it, that's kind of where the agricultural and the tourist business meet in the wine business. And I guess they get a double whammy. So let's go to the next issue, which is a big one. It has to do with the left side ramps and their safety. We have a copy of Mr. Doherty's letter, Dockery's letter. I suppose this is what you would call a one-size-fits-all. solution approach, and we think that's wrong. We think it totally ignores local experience and local knowledge. If you look at the history of R2 southbound left-hand off-ramps, they are safer, and this came straight out of CalTrans DEIR. They are safer than the 5 previous right-hand off-ramps in the city of Santa Barbara, starting at Milpas and Garden, Castillo, Carrillo, Mission. So when we're told that they're not safe, we have data, they have data that says, not so fast. In the DEIR, there are a number of proposals that are disqualified from any further consideration. And basically what it says in the document is driver expectations. You're driving along, you don't know there's a left-hand off-ramp, it causes confusion. CalTrans never took the time to ask the question, who uses these off-ramps? Whose expectations are we talking about? These ramps are used exclusively by people who live in Montecito. We use them every day. They don't come as a surprise. They're not a problem. But we have some giant rule that says we can't have left-hand off-ramps. And I would say the clincher in our argument to say an exception should be considered is the fact that we just finished the Milpas operational improvements. We spent millions of dollars building a new 3-lane bridge and 3 lanes headed southbound. And we left the left-hand off-ramp in place. So when we hear we can't approve it, we know that's not true. We won't argue that maybe if you were to start from scratch, you wouldn't want to, but we know it can be. And if it lessens the impacts on this county, it ought to be given careful consideration and not disqualified out of hand. Let's go to the next issue, and I'm running really short on time. Let's talk about the HOV lanes, because that is a second exception that would need to be granted. There's a lengthy discussion in the consultant's report about the efficacy of HOV lanes. I'll just touch on 2 quick points. Studies show that over 50% of the people who use HOV lanes are family occupants. So you don't really take a car off the freeway when your spouse is in the car with you or your child is in the car with you. And I think that occupancy component would be especially true in a tourist area. History shows that the carpooling has not served as an effective, HOV lanes have not served as an effective incentive for carpooling. Historically, carpooling was about 14% of the traveling public. It's now under 12% of the traveling public. But that's not really what we want to focus on. What we want to focus on, our real issue, is where does the HOV lane start? So if I can have the next slide. No, next one. Ron, maybe you can help me with this. If you look right on the CalTrans design, right where you have the T right there, what's happening there is you have a new right-hand off-ramp that comes into the freeway. You have 3 general-purpose lanes. And then in California, in order to start an HOV lane, you have to add a 4th lane. So right there, if you look at it optically, it is the most constrained, most congested part of the entire corridor. And so what this proposal is, count them. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lanes we're trying to stuff in the narrowest part of the entire corridor. And then what you don't see that's off the bottom of this picture is there's a sharp, for you golfers, there's a sharp curve, dogleg to the left, that then feeds into a 60-year-old underpass at Olive Mill. Just before you get to that, there's a right-hand off-ramp. So you got people getting off, you had people getting on, and then when you go under that underpass, we have to lose a lane. For the sake of the HOV at this point, we have to lose one of the general purpose lanes. It's a recipe for a bottleneck. We have it now. We lose a lane when we go under the underpass. We're going to force a merge, and it's just going to be more congestion. Okay, let's go back one. Our problems in looking at the operations of this freeway when it gets built. You have what I just touched on. You have a carpool lane that is going to force a merge. Our problem isn't with the carpool lane, it's where it starts. And our suggestion is get it out of the congested corridor, put it over into the flat area just beyond, in Summerland, somewhere between Evans and Padaro, where you've got a lot more right-of-way. It's a straight section. The best thing to operate in this corridor is 3 straight lanes through, minimize the turbulence in the area. The second problem we have with the operation I also touched on, which is that you've got a signal at the off-ramp at Cabrillo Hot Springs northbound, right adjacent to the roundabout.
Mr. Overall, thank you. We practiced this. I really want to thank you. I thought you did a brilliant job. And we don't usually clap, but I think you folks maybe ought to clap for him because he really put a lot of work into that.
Madam Chair?
Thank you. Now, Director Richardson has a question,
Yes.
and we also have public comment.
I'd like to offer the suggestion that his presentation was so thorough and concentrated that he didn't have sufficient time to give an adequate presentation. With the acceptance of the rest of the committee, I would ask that you extend his time.
I would agree.
All right. Is there a motion to extend his time? How much time are you talking about?
How much time do you need?
Let's see.
I'll do it in less than how's that?
How much?
I'll do it in less than 5 minutes.
Okay. All right. Everybody okay with 5 minutes? All right.
You already convinced me.
And remember, we're only receiving and filing, so you don't have to be real convincing.
Sometimes you can talk too long.
All right. I want to talk about the rest of the operation. When you come through that Olive Mill underpass headed south, there are 3 more problems with making this freeway system operate well. And we totally support the need to relieve the congestion. The problems are these. You come through that Olive Mill underpass, and then the Olive Mill or Coast Village Road extension, which becomes an on-ramp onto the freeway at Olive Mill. It's a steep on-ramp. It declines in altitude. It's a short on-ramp as it comes into the freeway. And then there's a fairly significant bend to the right. It's a blind corner. So you have the potential of a safety problem and congestion right there where they meet. Right around the corner, you have the San Ysidro Road off-ramp, which is also short. It gets plugged up every morning, every school day morning, when people bring their children to school. The solution to that is very simple. It's been done lots of other places. It's just make an auxiliary lane. We think the CalTrans owns the right of way to do it. Just make one continuous acceleration, deceleration lane connecting Olive Mill and San Ysidro, and we think you'll relieve a lot of potential congestion relief producing condition. The next one relates to the picture. I don't know if you recall back, but when they were showing the picture of the Posilipo on-ramp, we refer to that as the San Ysidro on-ramp. It's just past the Miramar Hotel, what's left of it. And you have a very, very short on-ramp. There's a retaining wall or a sound wall on the right, so there's no escape. There's a stop sign, and you start from a dead stop, and you have to get on in a real hurry. The response we got from CalTrans was, well, what's the accident record? We can't touch it because it doesn't have any accident history. And our response, based on local knowledge, is, of course it doesn't have an accident history. Anybody who lives in Montecito, and with the Miramar having been closed for the last 13 years, there aren't many other people using it, nobody in Montecito is going to use that on-ramp because we all know it's dangerous. It ought to be fixed by bringing it back up to San Ysidro, creating a regular on-ramp, when the Miramar or whatever ends up going in there, it'll work considerably better. So there are 3 significant known but unaddressed problems in the CalTrans approach. That at the end of the day, if you build it and you don't address it, the community is going to be faced in another few years with more construction in the community to fix a problem that's known, and it's going to make the freeway not work as well as it should and can. So go back to where I started, what our goals were. And I'll ask it as a question. Does our approach minimize the time required? The answer is yes. Does it reduce the disruption to the community and to businesses? The answer is yes. Do we spend your money wisely? Yes. And at the end of the day, are we going to solve the congestion problem better than the approach that CalTrans has presented? I would say yes. So I think that warrants your careful consideration of the approach. We know that there are design exceptions required. We know that there are lots of missing material and information you're going to want related to the CalTrans approach. But we're going to have to live with this for a long time. It's the biggest construction project to hit Montecito in 60 years. So if we have to take an extra month or an extra 2 months to figure out and get some of these answers, we would certainly encourage you to do that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening.
Could somebody get him a bottle of water? This has been very... Whoop, whoop, only once. We only get to clap once in our lives at this. So, Mr. Overhaul, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And again, thank you for coming up and helping me through this. Yeah.
Mr. Overall, sorry to bring you up again. I just have a couple of questions just to clarify in my own mind. So, so it looked like from the picture and from what's in the book here that the northbound median off-ramp at Cabrillo Boulevard, the current one will be closed and re-landscaped. So is that, I thought you wanted that left turn off-ramp.
You're talking about the northbound left side off-ramp? No. Originally, yes, that was part of under consideration. But when we heard the rationale and the concerns, and particularly related to out-of-town visitors, we thought, you know, there's a different way to approach that. We can accomplish what needs to be done. We don't have to hang on for dear life with that left-hand off-ramp. So we do close that in our approach.
Okay. Well, that's helpful. Thank you. Then the issue of the Los Patos. So you're suggesting closing that off-ramp, the southbound
You close it as a southbound off-ramp.
But opening a...
And you convert it to a southbound on-ramp. Yes.
Okay.
And in order to make that work, you have to reduce the roadbed so that it can pass safely underneath the bridge.
And what's the reasoning for doing that, for the southbound on-ramp?
You could approach it a different way. You could put up a sign that says no truck access, and that would solve it easily. But assuming that we want limited truck access, by the way, we're not talking about a lot of vehicles. The city of Santa Barbara was kind enough to provide some data that indicated the maximum loading, high peak hour would be like 389 cars or something like that. But the rationale is the bridge is only 12 feet 4 inches tall at this point, so it doesn't provide enough clearance for some trucks. The ones without special licenses require a 13-foot 6-inch clearance. So if you add a few extra inches on top of that, those trucks should pass through there if that's the route that we want to go. I think there are a lot of details that have to be worked out, but that's the rationale behind it.
And just finally, I want to thank you for bringing up the San Ysidro on-ramp issue with the length of getting on. That has always troubled me because there's that sound wall. So there's no
bailout.
There's no bailout. So I think you brought up a really good point on that one too. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I hope none of you fire me. I'm trying to move this along. I'm doing my best. We're thinking about it. I can understand. December 31st. We have 9 speakers at this point in time. Are there any other folks that want to get their speaker slips in? Because this is it. If you don't have a speaker slip in, you're out of luck. Okay, So with that, we're going to start with, and I'm going to go ahead and give him 3 minutes. Mr. Monk, you're up first. Richard Monk, followed by Thorne Robertson. Mr. Robertson, are you here? Yes. Okay.
Good morning, Madam Chair and Directors. I'm Richard Monk, and I represent Ty Warner and the Montecito Country Club. And Mr. Medell is here with me, who's a representative of Mr. Warner. I think he's submitted letters, and it's been his position that the Montecito Country Club is opposed to that part of the presentation that you just heard that would require the acquisition of a portion of the club's property. So we're not in opposition to the proposal in its entirety, but only to that portion that would require acquisition. Mr. Medell will tell you that when the country club was first approached by the proponents of this alternative, that they made it very clear that the club was opposed to any acquisition of a portion of its property, that it's not for sale, and that they would oppose any attempt at eminent domain. And they've consistently restated that position throughout the processing or proposal of this alternative. We appreciate the fact that SBCAG has proposed an HOV program project which does not require the taking of any private property. Rather, the preferred alternative is designed to use public right-of-way. In a 1993 case, the United States Supreme Court said that individual freedom finds tangible expression in private property rights, and that private property should only be taken in the rarest of circumstances. The California Code of Civil Procedure recognizes this because they require special findings in a resolution of necessity before there's any taking of private property, and one of those findings requires a finding by the agency that's going to take that the property described in the resolution is necessary for the proposed project, and that the project is planned or located in the manner that will be most compatible with the greatest public good and the least private injury. And all of those findings must be supported by substantial evidence. We would submit that any agency that would propose to take a portion of Mr. Warner's property to support this project would have difficulty making those findings in view of the fact that there are suitable alternatives that have been presented and that are being processed that do not require the taking of any private property whatsoever. In fact, I think Mr. Hart stated that at the outset, at the very outset of the HOV project, they made a decision that no private property would be acquired, not only to keep the costs down, but also just because they didn't think it was appropriate. And we would urge your board to reject that portion of the proposal that was just presented to you that requires the taking of private property. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Monk. Any questions? Folks, I know you've been here a long time today, and we have this one rule that if you'd like to follow. If you'd like to speak for just 1 minute instead of 3 minutes, if you stand up and walk over to the wall, I'll take your comment right now. Oh, woohoo! I just got my job back. Miss Jordan, I do recognize you, so I'll let you go first, okay? Thank you.
Thank you, directors. I know that we are all concerned about the environmental impact of this project, and I would just like to say that if it applies, we need to ask ourselves, what are the requirements of an environmental review under CEQA? The answer is a project may not be approved as submitted if feasible alternatives or mitigation measures are able to substantially lessen the significant environmental effects of the proposal. That's CEQA. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Jordan. Next person. If you'll just give me your name.
Martha Siegel.
Martha Siegel. Hi, Martha.
Hi, good morning.
Welcome.
I am going to be brief. I'm representing Save Our Village, which is a grassroots organization that's made up of residents living closest to and most affected by the Cabrillo Hot Springs interchange. Because that portion of the 101 HOV project has the greatest impact on our property and lifestyle, and because we are daily eyewitnesses to traffic impacts in this area, we will confine our comments only to the Cabrillo Hot Springs interchange of the 101 HOV project. We have actively studied and commented on this project since February 2001. Our position has not altered. We oppose any major northbound off-ramp that uses Hermosillo as the sole southbound off-ramp. After extensive study, we also have felt that F-modified